Welcome to Wednesday. I can visualize events in the story, and I can identify the characters, setting, and the cause and effect events of the story. Our essential question that we've been thinking about is how can one person change the way you think? This question will help us to identify the characters, setting, and the cause and effect events of the story. So your to-do is to watch this mini lesson and then read and record on the ball. Then complete workbook page December 16th, Wednesday and Thursday. So since our purpose is I can identify the characters, setting, and the cause and effect events of the story, I have a question. How do I identify the cause and effects key details? Well, I'm going to ask, what is cause? Why something happens? So maybe this how can one person change the way you think could be rephrased as why does somebody change the way someone thinks in this story? So the cause is why something happens. The effect is what happens as a result. Well, what's going to happen when the person changes the way they think? So here are some examples of what cause and effect might look like. A cause. What makes something happen? Why it happened. The effect. What happens? Here are some signal words that an author might use. The author might not use them all the time, but these are words that will help us as readers to identify a cause and effect key detail. Because, as a result, therefore, so, since, due to, which caused, if something happens, then something happens, consequently, and thus. Here is an example. It rained. This is the cause. The effect of it raining is I got my umbrella. So you might see a signal word. Because it rained, I got my umbrella. So why something happened, or this is what happened to cause this result. Since it rained, I got my umbrella. That's another signal word. Or due to the rain, I got my umbrella. This is our graphic organizer that we will use this week. You will also complete a graphic organizer where we will identify our character, the setting, and then as we are reading, we will be thinking about our essential question in order to identify the cause and effect key details. How can one person change the way you think? Let's go into the text, Jane's discovery. Okay, I'm thinking about my purpose. I can identify the characters and setting, and then I'm looking for a cause and effect key detail. Jane's discovery. How can one person change the way you think? Let's read to identify our character setting and the cause and effect key detail. Jane slammed the door of the log cabin and raced toward the Indiana woods. Okay, I already have our character, Jane. And Jane is racing towards the Indiana woods, so I am predicting that our setting is going to be in the woods. Mother and father insisted that Jane go to school and learn to read. It was September of 1825, and Jane wanted to help on the farm like her brothers. Therefore, she told her parents no and refused to learn to read. So Jane is upset. Why? Because her parents wanted her to learn to read. Well, after that situation, as we read on, we find out a result. Jane scooped up her long skirts and splashed through a small stream. Running helped her collect her thoughts, so she ran for what seemed like hours. She dashed around a tree and wasn't paying attention. I'm going to pause here. So if I go back into this first paragraph, Jane slammed the door of the log cabin and raced toward the Indiana woods. This is what's happening right now. Why does she do that? Her father and mother insist that she go to school to learn to read. I'm going to record these key details on my graphic organizer to organize my thinking. Who's my character? Jane right now. We will meet Abe, but we know that because we read for the genre earlier in the week. Our setting, the woods near Jane's house. Why does something happen and what happens? Well, Jane is upset because mother and father want her to learn to read. So since mother and father want her to learn to read, what's the result? Jane refuses and runs through the woods to calm down. So I used the text and the events to develop complete sentences. This is the cause. Mother and father want her to learn to read. And this is what happens. Jane refuses and runs through the woods to calm down. Let's go back to the text and find out in order what happens next. I'm going to reread this second paragraph. Jane scooped up her long skirts and splashed through a small stream. Running helped her collect her thoughts. So she ran for what seemed like hours. She dashed around a tree and wasn't paying attention. As a result, she tripped over a pair of long legs stretched out in the grass. As a third grader, I noticed a signal word that signals to my brain a cause and effect key detail. I noticed as a result. So what happened? Jane tripped over a pair of long legs stretched out in the grass. Why did she do that? Because she was running from her house, not paying attention. I want to read on to find out the characters' names of these legs. The legs belonged to her neighbor, Abe Lincoln. Abe was leaning against a tree, reading a book. He smiled, stood up, and extended his arm to help Jane up. So, since Abe was leaning against a tree reading a book, Jane tripped over his legs. Let's record this cause and effect key detail in our graphic organizer. So we're going to record our cause and effect on our graphic organizer to organize our key details. Abe is leaning against a tree reading. What happens since he's leaning against that tree reading? Jane trips over Abe's legs. Let's go back into the text to identify another cause and effect key detail. Jane recognized Abe and knew what a hard worker he was. But she also heard he was not like the other 16-year-old boys in Perry County. Abe was different because he spent all of his spare time reading books. "Why are you running so fast?" Abe asked. "Are you hurt?" Jane frowned. "No, I'm all right," she said. "I'm running because I'm upset." Here's another signal word, because. What's happening? Jane's upset. Why is she upset? Let's read on to find out. My parents want me to learn to read, and I told them no. So Jane's upset because her parents told her that they want her to learn to read. Abe looked down at his book and then at Jane. "Reading can change your life," he said quietly. "Meet me here tomorrow and I'll prove to you how important reading is." So I'm thinking about my essential question. How can one person change someone's mind? Well, right here, Abe said reading can change your life. So he's already trying to show her how he can change her mind. Jane met Abe the next afternoon. He showed her a book about George Washington. One of his favorite teachers had donated it to him, and he had read it many times. Abe began to read aloud while Jane listened carefully. He read about Washington and what a great leader he was. He read about Washington's courage and bravery. "Someday I want to be as courageous as George Washington," said Abe proudly. "Someday I will be president of the United States, too." "I believe you will make a great president," said Jane. "Look at what a good leader you are now. You've completely changed my mind about reading." Abe smiled. "Tell your parents you will learn to read," he said. "Then meet me here every day after school. We will read together, and I will help you." At first Jane was nervous and uncertain about learning to read, but she met Abe every day like clockwork. Fortunately, Jane's intense dislike for reading was only a temporary feeling. She was getting the hang of it. As a result, her nervousness began to disappear. There is another signal word. As a result, her nervousness began to disappear. Well, Jane's not nervous about reading anymore. Why? Because she's getting the hang of it. Abe is teaching her how to read. Let's record that cause and effect key detail in our graphic organizer. So I have Abe teaches her how to read and she gets the hang of it. What happens since Abe teaches her how to read and she gets the hang of it? Well, in the text it said, as a result, Jane is not nervous about reading anymore. Her nervousness disappears. We just reread our text with the purpose to identify the characters, setting, and the cause and effect events of the story. We identified the character, Jane and Abe, the setting, the woods near Jane's house, and we identified the important cause and effect key details. Remember, the effect is what happens, and the cause is why it happens. You are now going to do this with your read and record. Good luck and have fun. Make sure to refer to this video if you need support.